Am I unmuted?
There's Steve.
Yep. Good evening, gentlemen. We're waiting on Dwight here, and probably another minute or two just to allow folks to find the login information and get set up. So hang tight another couple minutes. Find us.
Oh. Mute.
Someone may have a lot of feedback on their. Another minute or so. All right, it looks like we have a full council. We have our city manager, city clerk, people are calling in, and a few of us are logging in still. So I'll call this meeting to order. Our Tuesday, May 12th regular council meeting. So the meeting is now called to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of
Flag,
the United States of
America,
America,
Republic,
Republic
stands,
stands,
nation, under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll work on that one. So
That was choppy.
for joining us tonight. We have a light agenda, but I'm glad that folks were able to call in. And because we have 4 people who have joined us through the phone only, we will earmark time specifically for folks to call in. If you are using the computer and WebEx, then comments, feel free to use the chat feature as well if you want to make sure that you speak on a particular item. So moving forward then, we have no closed sessions. So first order of business is the minutes from the April 14th meeting. And I know we received comments for one of the meetings. I'm drawing a blank on which one it was. Let's see. Any of the council remember which meeting the
April 14th. April 14th.
The April 14th, okay. So those comments were submitted. Gabe, have you had a chance to review those comments?
Yeah, I reviewed the comments and I responded to, I believe it was Mr. Harris. And I sent the email to all the council because essentially these are your minutes, you know, and I am open to whatever you guys decide as a council what should be included, but I did respond.
Okay. Any thoughts from the council on the comments made, the public comments made regarding the minutes for April 14th? We have one from Sarah Lindgren Akana who wishes to basically comments exactly as submitted, and as Sarah Akana not representing the Ancestral Society And the second one, Dave already spoke to from Richard Harris regarding the comments that he made. Anyone wish to add these comments and update the minutes from April 14th?
I think that would be fine. I think your second statement about Richard Harris is, or the comments he made, he's not asking his comments to be changed. He's asking some transcription. He said that minutes, it says I said treating an additional 48,000 gallons per day. That I said 43 on the recording. I recall that there was 43 in the figures. So I think that it's not unreasonable to ask for Sarah's marks to be changed. Stated she wasn't speaking on behalf of the Trinidad.
Tom, your audio again is
Sarah stated she wasn't speaking on behalf of the Trinidad Ancestral Society, and her comment didn't state that. So, fair to change her request.
Okay. Any other comments from the other council members?
Not at this time.
No.
none.
So do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the amended comments submitted by the public?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously.
Steve,
Then we
Steve?
have minutes from,
Captain Steve,
yes, sir.
point of order. Why don't we just have people show their hands as well as their voice, so that, because sometimes it's hard to clarify just who has voted or not.
Got it. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
I will keep an eye on that too, and that's why I said passed unanimously, but that's a good thing. If we can all get our hands somewhere in the camera, that'd be great. The second order is the minutes from April 28th, from our second meeting. Do we have a motion or, sorry, any discussion about the minutes from April 28th?
Well, I'll move to accept the minutes.
I just add a comment about my when I was questioning the person who's taking the planning commission job. I just wanted to clarify that the reason I asked if he had experience was because he's like me, coming from construction of this, and I think some comments after may have insinuated that I was making that a qualifier for him, which I wasn't. So I just want to clarify that on public record, because that would be quite hypocritical, I think, if I expected somebody else to. So, besides,
Any positive change then that you want to make to the minutes, David, or just leave it the comment as is?
we'll just leave it as is. I wanted to clarify now, so I think that's good enough.
Okay.
What would it be appropriate for us to add the phrase in parentheses, not a criticism, or something like that? You know,
I think everybody understands.
okay. It's just a question of when we put things into the record for minutes. It's more than just the five of us here, and not saying sure. That's all.
I don't even see what you're referring to, David. I see you saying thank top.
It's in the transcript. It's just something that I don't know if you want to search for it, but
Oh, it's not
just
on
something
our.
I
It's not in
remember.
our
And I just
packet.
wanted to
It's not in
clarify
our packet.
in a public setting, just so that people understood where I was coming from.
Okay.
I-
I've been a little off course, but I appreciate you listening.
I move to second, then your motion to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Passes unanimously. Jack first, Dwight second. Thank you very much. Let's see. Council reports and committee assignments at this time. Let's start with Mr. Grover. Actually, no, this is our first meeting of the month. Sorry. Yes. Any report or council reports, David?
Okay, I have no committee assignments per se that I'm going to meetings now, but I do have a matter of disclosure and something that I'm doing on my own. I've been nominated from the co-chair of the Green Party to be a Green Party delegate. I think that'll be a useful position for me to get some more updated information. And another thing I've taken upon myself, you may have got the invitation from Jared Huffman I'm going to be having bi-weekly meetings with him where I can ask him questions. They're really quick meetings, but I get to ask him questions or make recommendations to him about ours. So I think that's going to be very beneficial to go, right to the federal level there. Maybe we'll get some clarity.
Thank you. Jack?
No meetings, nothing to report.
Tom?
We're going to be discussing anything that I would be reporting for the Trails Committee this evening. Nothing.
Makes sense?
Yep.
Wyatt, have you been able to attend anything?
Yes, I had an RCA meeting, and a majority of the meeting was discussing plans for acquiring more energy. Basically, a 100 megawatt project in the Central Valley is the contract we approved, and it will be coming online in 2022. And that's the major source. We had a discussion about how the energy flux and usage and rates would be affected by usage during the COVID crisis, but it was a lot of just discussion back and forth, nothing of major long-term importance. We're moving ahead, though. Contracting with green energy is the main thing that was held at the last meeting.
Any discussion on the island testing that PG&E conducted last week?
No, there wasn't. That was not on the agenda.
Okay, just curious. So let's see, my report is, like everyone else, sort of a skeleton crew of meetings. Our next Redwood Region Economic Development meeting is on the 18th, so I'll have something to report later. And that's the only committee assignments that are relevant. I do want to say I received several comments from the public sent directly to me asking that the council not consider any items on the agenda during COVID-19 restrictions that are really better served when we can do it in person. Examples include, but are not limited to, the hotel water request and actions like that. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that that was a statement we had made during our first attempt at a WebEx meeting, and I believe that the council still remains incredibly dedicated to having only discussions in person when the topic requires everyone to. And we have 5 folks who have called into this meeting, and we do not want technology to interrupt the civic engagement. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. That is the end of my report. At this time, I'd like to switch over to council report. Sorry, staff report. Eli. Yes, sir, Dwight. You're on mute, Dwight.
Okay, what a follow-up to what you just said is I personally agree with the idea that we should have meetings in person as much as possible, but we also have to recognize the reality that this may be a long haul that we're in video. So we may need to reevaluate our preferences in the light of what's going on as we get down months into the future.
Through that, and I just want to reiterate that, that when it comes down to it, it's the really important items that are long-term, that have a long-term effect, that really need everybody's input. There may be some agenda items that we have that are smaller in scope, but we definitely will leave large decisions for in-person. And then I did get a comment in the chat from a couple different people saying that Tom and I were cutting out. So I don't, I hear myself fine. So thank you for letting me know. I know that sometimes when I turn my head, I'm not as clear. Jack is nodding his head. Maybe I'll put a collar on me next time and keep me from doing that. But if all of us could just be attentive to that, that would be very helpful. Very much. So at this point, yes, sir.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I'll work this way then. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so at this point, we'd like to have start off with Eli with the staff report.
Okay, I've included some items in the packet, and in addition to that, I wanted to show everyone here, I don't know if you could see on here, but this was sent to us from Area 1 Agency on Aging, and we have 169 of these packets. They've got tuna creations, chicken creations, they've got crackers, they've got beans, they have fruit, cocktail, they have drinks, juice drinks, orange juice, raisins, etc. So we have 169 of these packets. They are available for people that are 60 years old or older. And so we want to make that available to our residents in Trinidad as well as the greater Trinidad area. So if you know anyone, if you can pass the word around, and we'll have those available. Yes, Dwight.
This is a matter of logistics and how to deal with it. But some people in the trailer park and some people in the trailer park just at the edge of town. I forget the name of the village out on the edge, and there's a number of people who would qualify for that age and probably need situation. The question is how to reach them. So, for the most part, in the residences in town, I'm not familiar with anybody that has this kind of need. But my guess is that if we can somehow check out the demographics and where are people likely to be, and have some mode of outreach, I'd be happy to make phone calls if we can identify. I'd be happy to help.
And Dwight, I think that a use of that large email as a way to spread the word. I think that's Eli on mute. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I think this is a good reason or good way to use that email listserv that you have, and not only to the folks who get the email, but to reach out to neighbors they know. And if I'm not mistaken, Eli was given sort of the area of Oric down to West Haven. So that's a pretty large area for folks that might need a little extra assessment kind of time. So maybe the two of you could work together on an info email. That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll continue. So being in touch with both AT&T and Verizon, asking them for their update, and as far as Verizon, they said that their project is moving along, and they're getting the building permit this week, and they expect to have that in place, and then they'll go through the building department and give us a better timeline for next month. As far as the update from AT&T, their building permit has been submitted. The lease is fully executed. They plan to start construction in August and be done by October. So that's the update from the two cell tower companies. In addition, Sprint contacted me. They've been bought by T-Mobile, but they're planning on removing their portion of the tower within the next few months. Also, I was in on the governor's update today, and one of the portions that's included in phase 2 is is regarding restaurants, and the fact that probably by Friday, it's very possible that Humboldt, they're going county by county. There's a meeting in Humboldt tomorrow to decide whether they should go into the second part of phase 2. And if they do, then it will allow for restaurant dine-in. And there's guidelines that I'm going to be submitting to all of the restaurants in town, informing them of those guidelines. So that we should be knowing a little bit more about it by the end of the week. And I'll send, or at least have an update available on our website. Also, as far as the law enforcement, we are going to get an extension. Yes, do we have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. I wondered if you got any information why we're getting an uptick in COVID cases this week. We've had like, we didn't have any for like a month, and now we got like 11, and it seems to like everything's opening. So I just wondered if what kind of input you're getting, what kind of information you're getting about that.
Yeah, the weekly calls that we have with the sheriff and the health officer only occur on Thursdays. So this happened since last Thursday, so I'll get the next update on this Thursday. And then the other thing is just regarding the law enforcement, they are going to give us a second amendment to the agreement, which will be good for 3 months. And they're saying this will allow us time to negotiate a new agreement. So that will be coming up soon for the council. And that's all I had, unless there's any other questions. Yes, Dwight.
I'd just like to comment for everybody. We noted in the staff report that Ryan retired 12 days ago, and I'd like for all of us to recognize his great service over the last 20 years.
Yes.
So maybe just I don't know, an informal motion of consensus by the staff. Maybe we'll have some comments for the next meeting, a formal resolution about his retirement or something. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. We circulated a card amongst staff members, but yeah, resolution from the council, I think, would be very good.
Thank you.
We can add it on our meeting, which looks like it will be happening towards the end of next week. So next, let's see here. Yeah, next Thursday, we'll be having another meeting at 6 o'clock. So we can add it to that agenda.
Thank you.
And that would be our second meeting for the month instead of the 26th.
Why are we?
Would you mind discussing a little bit the nature of that second meeting?
Okay. The stormwater project, which is planned for this year, so we would have to go out and have the plans prepared and then go out to bid. So we wanted to have a meeting where the public can actually weigh in, one last time before we go forward with the project. So that'll be the key emphasis of that meeting. And then we'll also have the contract for the law enforcement added on there. And then we can also add a resolution for Brian Buckman too.
So can I clarify? So this is the second regular meeting?
Yeah, that would be our second meeting in the month instead of having it on the 26th, which is the day after Memorial Day. We'd have it on Thursday, the 21st. Or, yeah, 21st.
And the reason again for that is that paperwork that has to be submitted at a certain date, or what's the reason changing?
Well, it's, part of it is really, I wanted to bring it forward to the community. And since we have the COVID-19 going on, construction projects are still permitted to go forward, but I just want to make sure that the community is comfortable with having the construction project go forward for the stormwater. And we do have an order in place where, we are supposed to get it done as soon as possible.
But that doesn't answer the question as to why.
Oh, what is the question? I'm sorry.
The question is why is it needed on the 21st? Is it because now there is some time-sensitive documents that need to be turned in before or the 26th meeting?
Yeah, in talking to both Steve Allen from GHD and to Becky, our grants administrator, and we had a conference call with her yesterday and with Steve, and they said that the sooner the better to get the paperwork in. They were suggesting within a week, so that's why we thought we'd go ahead and have that meeting next week so we could keep moving with the timeline.
We just find out about it was better, or this has been in the plans for a long time. And the reason I'm saying this is because it seems like over the past few months, we have had to rush things because all of a sudden there is a deadline now we've got to have a special meeting or something because of a deadline. Perhaps what we're aware of for months, but now all of a sudden it's become urgent. So I don't want this to become a regular way the city does business. Like all of a sudden we have to get a part of the deadline. So we've got to have a special meeting prior to that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. No, I understand. As far as I know, all of the meetings that were needed have been held over time. And then now that we're getting ready to move forward with the plans and also with the bidding, I just thought it would be helpful to, have it at a council meeting where it can be addressed, make sure we get whatever input there is before we end up going out for bid and with the final plans. I just felt that it would be helpful for the community if we did that. Other than that, it wasn't required that we had to, because I'm being told that there were sufficient meetings that covered everything that needed to be done up until now.
It just seems to be up by 2 days, 2 business days. Just doesn't, I don't know. To me, that just doesn't seem, has to be another reason.
Yeah, it would be a week from this Thursday.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we're only moving the second regular meeting up by 2 business days.
Right.
So I don't know what the urgency is, but it seems like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like we're following our regular schedule, have these regular meetings. I just, I don't know, that doesn't.
Yeah, if it is the consensus of the council, I mean, we could wait until the day after Memorial Day, the 26th, and have it. Yeah, I don't think it's going to vary that much between the Thursday before and then the Tuesday after the holiday.
I just think keeping things on our regular time frame as much as we can is beneficial for everybody. See how I'm moving it up.
Okay, so when we had our executive committee, Jack and Steve were also at that meeting. We were going over agendas. So I don't know if you guys want to weigh in as far as what you heard from Steve and from Becky.
Well, I'll be glad to. There was a concern that they needed to get going quickly, and there's a lot resting on getting everything done on time. So it was, as talking it over, we thought if we moved it up, it gave us a better shot at getting everything, all the paperwork done. We were a little nervous about the possibility of not having everything in place and then having to put things off for a year because they couldn't get it done. They had said they'd like to do it as quickly as possible, so we thought moving it up even a few days would help. We also discussed the idea of not necessarily having going back to the public, but as Eli said, it's a nice thing to bring back to the public if possible. So we thought moving it up just made it a little safer.
I agree, putting it out to the public is important. I just think that we change meetings because all of a sudden there's an emergency, and I don't want to make any more.
And let me just chime in too. The other consideration here is that so the engineer and the grant administrator are concerned about missing an opportunity for going out to bid. Either you're real early in January or you're in May to be competitive. And there are financial considerations that we need folks to be aware of by delaying this a year. And so if we take a cautious route and go with next year, that's something that we needed to have a discussion. And finally, since March, we've not been able to keep up with city business with the public input in a way that has made us nimble. And so, yeah, we're outside of our normal meeting schedule because we're outside of our normal meeting capabilities. And so that's really all the different considerations that were made. Dwight, did you have a comment?
Well, this is not a vote per se, but I understand and appreciate Tom's concern. But in this situation, I'm hearing from several inputs that it's best to move even a few days earlier on this issue. This is a very big issue that definitely impacts the city. And given the COVID slowdown that's happening everywhere, our being able to move a couple days earlier will be helpful. So I'm in support of the Thursday meeting. But generally, Tom, I agree with your position. And one more thing, can you keep adjusting your mic? Because even as you speak, the sound goes in and out.
Try. This is my second attempt at a different mic, so.
Okay, thank you.
That was much better. That was much better. Okay, so thank you for that. Next, we're on to items from the floor. Let me just read this briefly so I get it all covered. Items from the floor are comments made of the public. May comment at this time on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments should be directed to the council as a whole and not to individual council members or staff. And council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. And so at this time, if you have a comment that you'd like to make, let's start with folks either unmuting themselves or starting in the chat and let us know that you want to make a comment in items from the floor. And I know people have to find their mouse and find how to unmute themselves, so we'll give us a second or two. But I'm not seeing anything in the chat, and I'm not seeing anybody on the call raising their hand. Let me scroll up and down. All right, at this time, then we've got 4 now callers in this meeting, and thankfully they all start with different prefixes. So Gabe, can you unlock 677 and see if they have an item from the floor? You're unmuted, 677. Nope.
Nope.
Can you unmute 825?
Yep.
825.
Hi, this is Shirley Laus. I don't have anything for comment. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Wow, Shirley, you're in the phone and in the computer. That's, I don't know how.
So,
Figured out how to clone yourself. Gabe, can you unmute 499, please?
499 unmuted.
All right, no comments. How about the last one, the 916?
There you go.
Okay, at this time then, no items from the floor. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Let's see, consent agenda, all matters on the consent agenda are considered routine by the city and enacted in one motion. Does anyone have any comments regarding the consent agenda? And I know that Tom had submitted a comment regarding the contract and the language. By any chance, Eli, were you able to fix the language in the version having that you submitted?
Yes, yeah, and I resent it to the council members so that that does have the verbiage that was agreed to at the last meeting.
Okay, just wanted to follow up on that. So we have the staff activity report, the financial statements, law enforcement report, and the contract. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All right, all those.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a first.
you don't need a second.
I'll second.
We got a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for that.
Did Dave just bring up an interesting point of order? Is on a consent agenda, is there no second needed?
No, it's one motion. It's enacted in one motion.
Well, I'm glad somebody read Robert's rules.
I think that was Bob's rules. I'm not sure if that was Robert's rules.
Okay, thank you.
Dave's rules.
Groovy rules. All right, moving on to the discussion action agenda items. Our first, sorry, I turned my head. Our first item is discussion decision regarding the Trails Committee recommendation for COVID-19 trail safety protocol. Tom, you had mentioned that this is your topic, so can you take it away?
Yeah, I'm just really looking for the piece it is in the packet. Hang on just for a minute. Scrolling. So the Trails Committee met last week, and we were asked to come up with some recommendations as far as trail COVID closures. And I think that Gail and Shirley are both on this call, so if I miss something, Gail and Shirley speak up. We made a motion that was in your packet that stated, I'll read it since other people see it, they have it, but it says, we recommend that there be a formal policy established, followed before any trail is closed. So it's kind of a two-part motion. And the second part would be the following are specific to a COVID-19 safety protocol, which are as follows. Brushing, ensuring line of sight, and having signage notifying users of mask requirements when social distancing cannot be met. Passed 5-0. Came up with the two-part motion because I feel it's important that the city have a established procedure for closing trails if it's for any reason, not just COVID. There are specifically the Van Wyck Trail has been trail closure enacted before COVID. I'm still wondering if CDP, coastal development permits, have ever been applied for in that. We're looking at getting a procedure on closed trails because it doesn't seem like one currently exists. And the second part is specifically for COVID. These are our recommendations that the trails, right now they're closed. So it's good to have a discussion whether they should remain closed. But if they should decide not to close them, then there have to be some specific protocol in place stated in the motion. Have any questions?
Any questions for Tom or for anyone else on the call who's a member of the Trails Committee if you want to chime in?
Just a question from Dwight.
Okay.
It's fairly thin here in terms of the presentation. The message that about a motion for tonight's meeting and so on. In my packet, I don't see much discussion about the rationale here. So I guess it's up to us to articulate basically our role in this situation as legislators versus the role of the administrator, which in most cities, legislation is for major issues, and we defer to the administration to make the call for day-to-day activities, such as if an emergency comes up, the administrator makes the call and lays out the barriers or the signs or whatever, as has been done in the past. So this is potentially getting more detailed management by the legislators of this particular subject. I'm not against it. I personally think that we ought to have some protocols that maybe we agree as a council that on the broad outlines of, but that we defer to the city manager and the public works people to make wise decisions on a more immediate basis than once a month or once every 2 weeks, where we meet and decide. I don't think this is necessarily the details that we should decide at this level, but it's just an observation.
Yeah, well, the reason we put this forward is because I wasn't at a meeting where the city council requested this, but it was forwarded to us as council wanted direction. So that's how our discussion evolved. Jack?
Yeah, I somewhat agree with Dwight. I really will hope that as we put this together a little more carefully, we do allow certain times that the city manager can make decisions. And maybe I'm not clear about this because I'm not sure I got everything, but It seems to me that we have to somehow allow for emergencies or for, and so I'm not sure if that was in there, but it seems like there's certain times that the manager's going to have to make a quick decision. So I wasn't sure if that's in there or not. So maybe you can clarify that, Tom.
No, it's not. And like I said, this was thrown at us a couple days before the meeting to put it on our agenda. So, and it was really just for COVID closure. The wording I got was that they also wanted recommendation. So recommended if they stay open, this is what needs to be done. So maybe.
And if I could,
I'm missing
Yeah.
conversation.
Could you repeat that last bit, Tom? We lost you there.
Said maybe Gail or Shirley could weigh in if they feel like I'm missing something from the Trails Committee conversation.
This is Gail. We did talk about if there was a major emergency on the trail that, of course, the city manager would make the decision to close the trail, like if, slid down the hill or something like that. But we just didn't feel that the COVID-19 was that kind of emergency. And the committee felt that currently some of the trails that are closed can safely be opened because there's room to get off the side of the trail, especially the Parker Creek Trail. If it gets brushed better, we could step off and get out of people's way. And that also that there should be signs saying that people need to be wearing masks on the trail when they get close to other people, and be smart about it. Otherwise, this is probably going to go on for a while, and we're missing out on recreational activity here at this point.
Thanks, Gail. Yeah.
Thank
you.
you.
Hello, this is Shirley Laus. So
Go ahead.
the motion that Tom read is just the final outcome because we felt that is not our role as the Trails Committee to write a policy or to write procedures. So we gave you the overarching recommendation, per the request that was forwarded to us. I understand Dwight's comment about rationale. So we did have a full-bodied discussion where we talked about all the rationale. So perhaps what would have been a better idea in hindsight was to send our minutes to show that full discussion that included the rationale along with just the final motion. Because what we felt was not that the city council has to make every final decision. It could very well be Public Works or administration or the city manager. But what needs to be done is to have some sort of policy or protocol in writing that says and calls out who makes what decision and when. And, it doesn't have to be a very long policy, but it just should give some guidance. Who makes the decision when it's just a routine thing? If it's a true emergency, something happened, there's a big storm and there's trees down, certainly it's a true immediate emergency. Somebody needs to close that trail immediately. That's one thing, but it should just be written down. Another thing is like the COVID. It can be closed, but only as long as mitigations don't work. So everything that Gail explained, the trail could stay open if all of those were in place. So, and then just as an example, the Van Wyck Trail, I may have personal reasons to either want it to stay open or to want it closed, but that shouldn't matter what my personal opinion is. It should matter, does it follow some sort of legal requirement, and does it meet a closure, does that meet all of the rules and regulations and policies that might be in place? Because we are in a coastal zone, so that makes it a little bit stickier to do trail closures. So as long as there's just a policy that says, no matter who's making the decision, they need to follow XYZ, like, the Coastal Commission regs or existing trail policy or, definition of emergency, something like that. It could just be a one-page thing, but it needs to be written down and a guideline to follow. So that way, if it comes up afterwards, the city council has something to fall back on and say, we made this decision, or our staff made this decision per this policy, and we followed all of these steps. That was a part of our discussion and our rationale.
Thank you, Shirley. David?
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in also.
You want to say something?
I just wanted to mention, um, as the city manager, and then also working with the council and talking with the executive committee portion, meaning our agenda review, getting input from both Steve and Jack. With the county and with the state, sometimes we have to be real nimble to be able to act to whatever changes are to cope with the COVID virus. And the main reason I wanted it to go to the Trails Committee is that we already had a couple trails that were closed. I just felt that the Trails Committee, because of your familiarity with the various trails, could weigh in specifically and say, trail X and Y we think should be closed, or trail A and B maybe should be open, something along those lines. I was hoping to get more of your expertise regarding the specific trails. Other than that, I think a lot of what we need to do is to follow both state and county policies that are responding to COVID-19, which even the Coastal Commission is going along with whatever the governor and the county are saying.
And I was thinking of our circulatory or safety element of the general plan for the verbiage of that. I mean, that's where I would assume it would go, and then we would either pass it or fail it depending on how it was written. Obviously, it would be discussion first.
Thanks. So thanks for your clarification, Eli. Yeah, we didn't get the message that we were looking at individual trails. That we thought we were looking at overarching COVID recommendation, but also started, like Shirley said, if a trail is closed for any other reason, and there needs to be a procedure that's gone through. So those are two separate things. So what you have is our recommendation, or an overarching policy of recommendations for COVID right now. Also for discussion at another time, perhaps, that wasn't the agenda item, as to how do we close a trail, follow all the correct procedures when it's not an emergency situation such as COVID, slide, or something.
You get all that, Eli? You're on mute, Eli.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get all of that towards the end. It was cutting out in the last portion of what Tom was saying. I got the first half.
Okay, so I guess the main point is that motion is two separate things. If a trail is closed for any other reason that is not an imminent emergency, there has to be a procedure that's followed, such as obtaining, since we are in the coastal zone, getting coastal development permit. Second part is like COVID, this is an emergency. So we gave general recommendations. That's what the second part of the motion. So it's the council's pleasure to decide, do we leave it the way it is? And as I understand right now, I think most of the trails have a closed sign in there. They haven't been moved. A couple of them have. But or do we try to open up trails that can be mitigated per our motion?
And if I could jump in here, and this is just showing how quickly things evolve. So when the council recommended this a couple weeks ago, the county had not given us guidelines such as, wearing masks in closed spaces when 6 feet can't be achieved and all these different things. And I think you're right that things have changed, and some of these trails can certainly be opened with signage reminding folks of COVID-19 responsibilities. The Parker Creek Trail, even the Trinidad Head Trail, can be used if people are wearing masks, if people are respecting other people's space, looking for wide spots. There's not always a wide spot that's not riddled with poison oak to make a pass on that trail, but it certainly offers plenty of opportunities with a little bit of cooperation. So what I'm hearing, and I really appreciate the summary that you put in that the Trails Committee put in that recommendation regarding the COVID-19 precautions about line of sight, opening the trail by widening it with brush clearing and so on. I think the city can easily adapt to the COVID-19 as it changes, because again, this was made a couple of weeks ago when we anticipated a long run with COVID-19 with a variety of changing conditions with COVID-19 over the next 12 months to 18 months. And so I think your recommendation that the committee came up with is spot on with that. And I think we do need a little bit more discussion on the second element that you raised, that the Trail Committee raises, because there is differing opinions on trails that are closed currently for safety concerns based on lawyer recommendation, legal recommendations, in particular the Van Wyck Trail. And so I think we need to come back to this one and make decisions on, on trails as they become deemed unsafe and how to move forward. There's been plenty of comments that indicate pass at your own risk, trail closed due to safety, pass at your own risk on one end, and don't pass at all with a large barrier on the other end. And as a city, I think we need to meet everybody's needs with this one. So perhaps we would come back to that one at a future meeting. Dwight, you had your hand up. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I think when you said come back and visit this again, I think it would be appropriate. Shirley's comments, extensive comments, were very good. And she's just recommending that, and I think probably Eli and Tom and maybe even Shirley, I think, by the way, a proposal could be drafted and passed among the most interested members of the Trails Committee without violating Brown Act, so that it could be refined and brought back to us, and it would deal with the kinds of concerns that Shirley so elegantly outlined very quickly there, and which you just cited, that we have a legal basis for making a statement about closure or making a statement about passage on risk. Whatever's going to cover, I think we ought to have a policy which allows us to have as much usage of trail as possible, only closing when absolutely necessary. And if it covers the city's legal liabilities, a clear posted sign saying passage on risk would be appropriate, but that be a part of policy. And so maybe we can get some wording so that we move forward in that direction for any trail, but it would specifically apply to the trail under contention, which is Van Wyck.
Thank you for your comments. Other comments, questions from the general public at this point? Well, we're a small group, so really from anyone. Any other members of the Trail Committee or the general public wish to make a comment? I hear someone trying to make a comment.
All right, I'm on 677. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This is Elaine Weinreb, Trinidad area, and this is maybe a little bit trivial considering what you're discussing, but the ocean side of the Trinidad Head Trail is really getting badly overgrown with poison oak. And if you want to make room, like for people to pass with the maximum amount of distance, as we're all trying to do, it would be a lot easier if the poison oak was cut back. And I know sometimes you guys do a really great job of doing this, and maybe you've just gotten a little bit behind, but it does need some work. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And that's what I noticed today, yesterday was it's oily and it's overgrowing. And I volunteered my services to cover head to toe and join Public Works to go out there with a weed whacker. It really does make for a difficult choice to fall off the trail on one side or get buried in poison oak on the other. Any other comments, though, regarding the subject at hand with the Trails Committee's recommendation?
Is this something that we want to give to our planner at all? To write it up, or because somebody, I've heard a lot about like some direct policy, so people have direction. That's kind of in her forte, or the commission itself.
I agree, David. We have to kind of weigh that with the general plan updates that's going on right now, but this does, as you mentioned, fit into the general plan, the connectivity portion of it. So maybe Eli could weigh in as he has sort of a global sense of the planner's plate right now.
Yeah, I can ask her and have her address that. I think that would be a good approach.
It's not a difficult plan. I think we're really looking for, from what the Trails Committee said, that we really just need, and Shirley's excellent coverage, we really just need guidelines on when decisions are made to open or close a trail, that they all follow the same set of protocol.
Are we just
discussion?
Regular closures or COVID closure right now?
Both of them. They're both really, they're both being asked for by the general public, and really just because of the state of COVID, that one has to be continued. But the general public is certainly asking for some clarity on trails.
I agree. Thank you.
All right. Dwight, was that a hand or were you swatting a bug?
That was a hand.
Okay.
Just a specific, because in our venue, the Trinidad Head Trail is most popular, and it is fairly clear that we're supposed to be one way, but I've met hiking that trail several people who say, forget it, I'm going to go the other way. So maybe we want another little stanchion up saying COVID crisis one way and 2 more signs or something. I don't know, because some people seem to think, oh, what the hell.
And I think including language about masks and about social distancing, I agree. I saw literally 2 people on the head, and they laughed that they were going the wrong way. They thought it was funny, and I did not share their sense of humor.
Right.
But had we all had masks on, it wouldn't have been an issue. So if we can give people more options on what they're willing to do to consider others' safety, I think we're in much better shape.
Yeah, but maybe it's a requirement to have your mask with you and put it on when you meet people, something like that. And then if that's posted that way, then I, for example, can say, "Where's your mask?"
You can say that now, Dwight.
Yeah, but it's tough though.
I have read the national reports about the guns in that situation.
Right, and I know it gets into some sticky territory. Eli, do you have enough direction from this discussion to move forward with both COVID-19 trail usage, activities, clearing, signage, that sort of thing, reviewing the openness or the each trail for the Parker Creek Trail, Trinidad Head Trail, review those with these guidelines and determine whether or not they can be opened?
Yes, I think so. I'll be talking to both Public Works and to Trevor, and for as far as the planning end of it. And yes, I think that gives us some good directions from the conversation.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, Actually, Eli, there we go. Seeing no other comments then, thank you very much for this discussion. And we will move on to our second item, which is continued discussion decision regarding 2020 sales tax election and calendar update. I'm assuming this is a Gabe intro or Eli.
I can let Eli maybe start it off, unless he wants me to take it from here. Either way.
Okay, Gabe, why don't you get started and then I'll follow up basically as the follow-up hitter. So whatever I feel like maybe you didn't cover, because I think you've got most of it fairly well.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to try to share the screen. We'll attempt to do this here. We'll bring that presentation back up that we have looked at once already. And by.
Thanks for putting that in the packet, Tim.
Yeah.
Could I make a comment while that's coming up? On the first page of the discussion notes there, with the background, at the bottom of the page, it says the second deadline is a July 14th council meeting, which is a Sunday. And
wrong. Sorry. It'll be, well, yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Dwight.
or maybe that was a June 14th. Maybe I'll have to go back and look at that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, July 14th is a Tuesday.
Okay, my bad. I read June. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, let's see what I can do here. If you want content to be viewed by those people, share your screen or application instead. Are you guys able to see this right now?
I am.
I am.
Okay, good. So,
Yes.
So where we left off at the last meeting, if I got this right, we had a preliminary discussion about what was coming down the pipeline. Council needs to make a decision, and I am setting that deadline to be June 9th, whether or not to proceed with adding a sales tax increase measure to the ballot in November. So I presented this series of slides. How do I advance? Oh, there we go. Bear with me for just a second. So I shared this series of slides where we had a little bit of the election history. What's next? We went over our generators of sales tax in the city. We touched on what I understood to be the sales tax rate breakdown, or the anatomy of a sales tax dollar. We did a revenue comparison from the last 7 years of the two different taxes, the 1% and the 0.75, which is our add-on tax, which is what we're considering, what council needs to decide whether or not is necessary to proceed with. We showed a comparison of those years in a graph format. I showed you this slide, which I think is about, I think we're getting pretty close to where, yeah, we're getting pretty close to the slide that showed the revenue sources for 2019. That was, that I think, unfortunately, I was just using real data from our audit. And I think it kind of left some open questions as to, what exactly does that mean for the upcoming years? For instance, Measure Z. Measure Z I included in this as the revenue sources, which, as you can see in the next slide in the graph, it shows up as a piece of the pie. And as we've understood, at least from the I think it was April 14th meeting, Supervisor Madrone, regrettably announced that the city will not be getting Measure Z to supplement this coming year. So what I did in response to where we ended off at the last meeting, I understood the council wanted to see some budget projection, and that was tying this sales tax discussion in with our upcoming budget year, which we then have to kind of anticipate for 1 year, 4 years, whatever the council may feel is an appropriate timeline to propose a sales tax to the community, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But tied into that conversation, I think, hey, hold on a second. I want to see what this COVID crisis might be meaning for the city in this upcoming year, or in this current budget year, but also perhaps next budget year, which everything is only a projection. There's only estimates. We really don't know, but I will say that Eli and I are spending quite a bit of time, as you can, if you happen to look at our staff report, or at least mine anyway, we've been spending a lot of time just staying in touch with our League of California Cities representatives, webinars, every way, every venue we can gather information about what analysts, experts, are estimating for the upcoming years. And the numbers that you see on this slide, to kind of recap, is where this is kind of left off at the last meeting, is some projections for what we anticipate for the current budget year that we're in right now. And as you can see under our sales tax, and Eli, feel free to jump in anytime if you want to correct me, or if there's any different information that you might know of, but we're expecting a 30 to 37% decline in sales tax revenue this year. And that would be for the March through June quarter. So the numbers that I've put up here, 11,000, is, and you can see in the red, budget minus 30% decline for April to June quarter. Occupancy tax, 85% decline. And I think it was an 80 to 90% estimate. So I just threw in 85. And then of course, down below, you'll see two other highlights. The interest earning, I'm actually subtracting from that. We all know if there's any investments, folks with investments, you'll see that interest isn't going to be quite as exciting as it has been in the last few years. But then there's that big Verizon rent windfall. And that happens to be probably the saving grace, so to speak, for this year, in how that rent played out for the city, because it actually puts the city almost at flush with this current budget year. There might be a slight decline. When we do our budgeting, we estimate, obviously, very conservative with our revenues, and we overestimate with our expenses. So we generally, as a budgeting principle, we hope that formula will leave us with a conservative budget. And in this particular year, I think if the expert analysts that we listen to and talk to are on the right track, then this is what our budget could potentially look like at the end of this fiscal year. And now I can move on to the next slide, which is, well, here's just a graph, for instance, of what we just saw. And then the next slide, I'm going to go into next year. So is there any questions about, I'm sorry, let me go back 2 slides. Is there any questions about this part right here, March through June 2020?
Mine's kind of a question comment. We have to decide this by June 9th if we're gonna keep going with the text. Okay.
Yeah.
The next meeting I have with Jared Hoffman is going to be about backfill revenues too. I know that's going to come into play in this. I just want everyone to be aware of that, and as we're making our decision.
Right.
We don't know what they're going to be or how much, so it's just something that's going to be taken into account, I'm sure, by June 9th.
Got it. Any other questions, comments?
Is the on the slide on the slide that has the red, the one that's up right now, it says occupancy tax 97,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're budgeting. That that doesn't seem
That's what we're anticipating.
like, so that's not an 85% decline from last year's. It's an 85%.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. That was just for the one quarter, just for the March through June quarter, the one quarter of the fiscal year.
All right, I understand.
Okay. And that's what these projections are based on is this last quarter, because this thing kind of all broke down in March.
Got it.
Okay. So if I'll move on from here, I'll go to this slide. This is what that pie looks like. No Measure Z now, and you can see some numbers have shifted a little bit. Occupancy, sales, sales tax, both sales tax and property taxes are all, they make up probably the major portion of our revenues. And then this is for next year. And again, I'm providing this information because that's what I understood we heard was that, hey, we're not sure if we can't really make this decision now, Gabe, but I'd like to see how how our future budget for this year and next year might look so that we can, maybe be more concrete or justifiable in our decision making process. So by no means this isn't directly related to sales tax, but I'm just starting a preliminary budget discussion. So this is kind of where the rubber hits the road as far as next year goes. Again, all these are estimates, but what I did is I took our revenue sources as a city, and I took what I felt like our baseline revenue amounts. They're not exact, but they're pretty close. Again, they're kind of relatively conservative in some places, but then like occupancy tax, it seems like it's the same every year. And these are the 30% decline column, the 40% decline, and the 50% decline columns are basically what Eli and I felt, based on everything we've been hearing, were some estimates of what that decline might do to the city of Trinidad's revenue sources next year if we just took a full baseline and then decreased it by 30, 40, and 50%. And the numbers that you see at the bottom in red, the parentheses, are the losses, and that is what the city could potentially see, as a loss. And my point here, I guess, in crafting the next phase of the budget, or whether it's the June meeting and the July meeting, hopefully we can have a budget proposed by the June meeting, but is the notes that I had written down below. Trinidad has adequate reserves to brace for the impact of 2021 fiscal year. It seems like Trinidad is bucking the trend. When everybody else is getting bad, Trinidad seems to be, they've done things right in the past as a council. It would be your policies. And for instance, Resolution 2019-05, this was passed last year. The city council basically made some pretty responsible decisions in terms of committing its reserves. And by committing those reserves, for instance, the city council in Resolution 2019-05 committed an emergency reserve fund of $490,000. It committed a budget stabilization fund of $490,000. And then the other remaining funds were basically for self-insurance and capital special reserve projects. So to me, this is the rainy day. And there were responsible decisions made in the last couple of years, if not a decade, with the money that has been saved by the city in appropriating its sales tax revenues. Because when I started in 2003, the city was nearly broke, if not bankrupt. And that sales tax money, as you go down to note, the third note down at the bottom of that slide, it says common for cities with large sales tax, occupancy tax revenues to have high reserves due to those volatility due to the volatility in those sources. So I think in this particular case, the sales tax has potentially helped the city brace for an emergency that we probably have never seen coming. And that said, we are maybe in a very unique position as a city to be able to maintain its critical services to the city by the use of the reserves, which have been created based on, I guess the sales taxes and good decision making over the last decade. So that said, I'm going to let you guys do the rest of the talking, and I'll answer any questions you need. The decision that we're faced now, because of the timeline of the November 2020 election, we have to make some commitments so we can prepare the ballot, we can prepare the Board of Equalization so that they can prepare themselves to get this thing going for us if we decide to continue in any way, shape, or form.
So that was very good, Gabe. I just wanted to add, because of the COVID-19 crisis and because of the potential losses, it definitely makes sense to go forward with a sales tax continuation and having it on the ballot, because we are going to drain some of our reserves, and that will allow us to help rebuild those reserves, because you never know, when you're going to be needing that. And today there was a very good call that Dwight and I were on, and the city manager from Pismo Beach was talking, and they have a quite healthy reserve fund, which is helpful for them, with this COVID-19 crisis. So I think that that's really important, because as Gabe was saying, when he first started here, the financial situation of the city was very dire, and it really makes it a lot more difficult for the council and the community, the residents, to move forward on anything, whether it's trails, whether it's the roads, whatever it is, when you don't have the money to do it. So it's really, and any grant projects that we have, for instance, both the stormwater and then also the Van Wyck connectivity project, all of those need a certain amount of cash on hand in order to move forward with projects like that. And it really behooves the city to keep funds available so that you can keep moving forward rather than having to either hop along or move backwards. So anyway, Gabe and I can help entertain any questions or comments you might have.
Go ahead, Dwight.
I do have a question.
Is that Richard?
Yes, is it okay to ask?
Yes, go ahead.
Just for clarification, I'm trying to understand why you have sales tax 1% and sales tax 0.75%. Are they completely different allocations, or is it the same tax just listed under different percentages?
It's different allocations. Every city gets the 1% sales tax. That's automatic out of the state. And then if you wish to have an add-on tax, then that's the 0.75. That's our add-on tax.
Thank you.
Dwight, you had a hand up?
Yes. I understand that state law does not allow city officials to lobby, should we choose to go back to the voters for the 0.75%. We can't lobby for it, but we can provide information about it. And I think it would be appropriate to set up a study, maybe we even spend a few $100 or $1,000 for some research group to find out more detail. And we've heard anecdotal comments in past years when this has come up, that a significant portion of this 0.75% is paid by tourists. And it would be appropriate for us to be able to say as closely as possible what that portion is, rather than just sort of a guess, because it is part of convincing the people of this town that many of the people are residents who aren't, just in a way, kind of have to put up with tourists. and they'd rather not. But if they recognize that tourists are basically paying not only their own way, but maybe even a little bit more by paying for the sales tax, this 3/4% sales tax, and also for the 1%, because the tourists pay the 1.75%, and so we'll get a greater sales tax on the 1% anyway. But if we have the 3/4%, if much of it is indeed paid by tourists, I think it would be more palatable, increasingly more palatable to the local voters, because there are voters who, when they buy a new car, get a big hit. That I can attest to that myself, because I got a car this year. However, in the long run, the majority of this funds, by my awareness from past discussions, has come from tourists. I'd like to see more specific information available to us as we decide, if we decide to move forward, so that we can give this information to the public.
Can I add a little bit to that, Dwight? I think Councilman Miller, one way, Eli might be able to maybe elaborate on any sources that we have access to that can give us that information, or we can deduct that information by. But one way we can attempt to illustrate what you are suggesting is, and I think we have some literature that was passed out, I think, by a proponent of the sales tax in elections prior that explains what is taxed here in Trinidad, for instance. Not just the online shopping stuff, but like which groceries. Groceries aren't necessarily taxed. So if you're a local and you shop at Murphy's, there are only certain things that are taxable at a grocery store. Same thing for restaurants. If you go to the local restaurants and you eat prepared food, that's taxed. Gas tax. So if you're a local and you got a renter card and you want to go to renter and you're not paying the tax here, then yeah, it's the people that are coming off the freeway to pay that tax. So I think I can work with Eli at least to find ways to bring that information forward. If it's not as literal as a number, a percentage. So I think we could work together on it.
Thank you.
I think you've done a really nice job. This is very clear. You did a really good job, I think, with the comparisons, the different explanations.
I agree. Nice job, Gabe.
It also lets us know how much a contribution that 3/4% is. It's huge.
Yeah, if you add for instance, if you just take that 0.75 sales tax out and you take that away, or you add that to the, let's just say to the amount already lost just with the decline, it almost doubles in some cases.
Yeah.
So it's pretty significant source of revenue. So I guess, I just want to make sure I'm clear. There's two steps. One, at the June, it looks like it's a July meeting, and this is as late as I possibly can take this, is in the staff report, it says if a decision is reached to continue the sales tax increase, wording must be drafted in an approved resolution. And that would be, hopefully at the June meeting, I would put that resolution forward, but at worst case scenario at the July meeting, where we also have to have a resolution drafted, which I can do, to ask the Board of Supervisors to consolidate our election with their election in November. So two resolutions. One, the first resolution will say the city hereby, has decided to put on the ballot in November blank sales tax increase for blank number of years. Now, if that's the case, that's where we need to get today, or by the meeting in June. We have a full schedule, I think, with budget discussions, I'm guessing in June. So the sooner we can at least see some light at the end of the tunnel, the better. So that's, I'll leave it at that. You guys take it.
I'd like to comment if I can. I think we need to get this going. I think it'd be a lot easier on Gabe if we could get this moving for the June meeting. So I don't know. I'd like to take the step. I don't know about making a motion yet, but I want to hear more public comment. But I think I'd like to see this done by June and get it going.
Yeah, I don't know what the holdup would be. It's only it's a ballot measure, and it's not like it's a mandate by the city that people have to vote yes on this or not. It gives the citizens a full right to decline or accept
Yeah.
their vote. So I don't have a problem with putting this on the ballot. I do have a concern that it's May and we haven't had one budget meeting yet. And the next meeting, it sounded like, was just for building project, and then we're into June. I feel like our budget discussion has to be a lot more robust than talking about this 0.75% sales tax we may or may not get from an election. So I'm fine with moving this forward. I feel like this if we don't start talking about the budget. If we leave it to one meeting and second meeting, I don't think that's responsible.
All right, any other comments from the general public regarding the sales tax?
From the council?
Go ahead, Dwight.
In the past 2 times that I've been sitting while we re-upped every 4 years, we've been given a couple of different options. And in the last one, I remember specifically, one option was to make it permanent.
Mhm.
And I think we need to have these options to be considered at the next meeting, because I'm imagining something like a 1% for 4 years or 0.75% permanent, and have an argument made for both of them.
Can I add a little bit on that real quick, Dwight?
Please do. Yeah.
We did at the last go around, we actually made a proposal to the council. I'm careful as staff because we're not really advocating for anything specific, but it was through a discussion I had with representatives from the Board of Equalization. They said, you guys, she looked at our history. She says, why do you guys keep doing this every 4 years? She said, why don't you just consider putting it in indefinitely or for 10 years? And she said, it only takes a majority of the council to undo it. So we brought that as an option in 2016. We said, 0.75 for 10 years, I think is what the previous city manager, Dan Burnham, proposed. And, it failed. I think there was a sentiment of sort of every 4-year referendum on city activity, function, behavior, and performance. But yeah, it depends on how you look at it. You can have it either way. You can do, like you said, there's all options. If you change the percentage, I think that is the only time where there would be a new implementation. And that costs somewhere around $16,000. So they'd have to undo the current one and redo the new one, and re-implement the new tax rate. So if you were to leave it at 0.75 for 10 years or 5 years, indefinitely, there wouldn't be any implementation charges to the city. And yeah, so you have that option, absolutely.
So I'm just proposing we have a couple of options to consider when we meet in June.
Other comments? All right, so I'm hearing a motion or an interest or direction from the council to have a couple different options for sales tax participation at 0.75% for the November ballot. And I don't believe we need a motion on that. This is just direction that we're giving to city staff. All right, so sorry, someone spoke? Nope, okay.
It was loud.
That concludes the agendized items for tonight. I do know that our next meeting next week is to cover the stormwater project to make sure that moves forward in a timely manner. And then our June meeting, first meeting for sure, possibly second meeting, is all budget. discussion, which would include a resolution for this tax because it certainly will inform the budget. So, and I don't think, certainly welcome council input, but I don't think we need anything else besides a budget meeting so that we can devote plenty of time to it and get plenty of feedback from folks. Any thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah. I just want to update you if I get to do that web meeting with Jared Huffman again, and because we were talking about backfill revenues, and obviously that'll be into us. So
Make sure that Eli and Gabe are aware of anything that you learned in terms
Yep.
of backfill and
CC everything. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So that too will inform this year's what we go into 21, 22 with. So. All right, so any thoughts for additional items for May or sorry, for June? All right, with that, then we.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
I'd just like to commend those people, in particular, Richard Klompus is sharing his video the whole meeting, and I applaud your enthusiasm, Richard. Thank you for staying with us, and others who are listening.
Yes, thank you for your input, everyone, and for continuing with your somewhat rough meetings here with tech and whatnot, but we're getting through. So thank you very much, and that adjourns tonight's meeting. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Have a good day. Let's